For big city vibes and small town charm.
Head to the downtown Lee Summit Farmers Market, where local meets fresh. Then grab a cup of coffee and discover a variety of shops and boutiques just around the corner. Continue the fun in downtown Lee Summit at a retro arcade bar. Discover your new beer at one of our 6 locally owned breweries. Cool off with some handcrafted cocktails at happy hour. In the night with live music and good company. Lee Summit, Missouri.
Hello, Lee Summit. I'm Laura Ingeman, and this is your flash briefing for the week of September 9th. City Council will hold a joint session Tuesday night with the Lee Summit R7 School Board at 6 p.m. at the Missouri Innovation Campus. The meeting is open to the public or watch live on the city's YouTube channel. If you can't watch, catch the recorded meeting on demand on the YouTube channel or by subscribing to the Council Debrief newsletter, which breaks down 3 to 4 key agenda items. Subscribe at cityofls.net. Plan for a night of rock and roll at the Legacy Park Amphitheater on Saturday, September 14th, as In Halen, a tribute to Van Halen, takes the stage at 7 p.m. Enjoy the explosive energy that captures the essence of one of rock's greatest bands. Prepare to be blown away. Buy tickets today at lsparks.net. The city is seeking individuals interested in contributing to discussions that will influence property maintenance code enforcement within the city. Ideally, participants would have firsthand knowledge of Lee Summit through residency, business ownership, or property management. Submit interest by September 10th on the city's website at cityofls.net. And beginning this week, we're giving our parking spaces a fresh coat of paint in the City Hall parking garage and north parking lot. The work will be done overnight starting at 10 p.m. September 9th, 11th, and 12th. Stay tuned for a brighter, fresher look. Thanks for listening and have a great week.
Welcome to the Lee Summit Sign Department. We are going to walk you through our process from start to finish. We make signs as needed here. It's not like we just go out into the field and place a speed limit sign here, no parking here. Our traffic engineers, they go through and they'll do field studies. They'll send us down an engineering work order for us to go out, place new signs or remove signs as needed. Coming from the material, our blanks come in and they're just aluminum blanks. We can put our white, our red, our fluorescent yellow, green, whatever. And basically what it looks like is just that there. Throw it up into the roller. And once we got it covered, take it to our work table here, and Tim will cut the corners, cut all the access off to where it's lined up right. As far as the plotter and the software that we use, there's a street name sign there, and he's gonna go ahead and print that out on the plotter so you can see the plotter and how it operates and runs. There's standards for the height, even just on letters on the sign blank. Basically what we have on the computer there is it's pretty much set up to those. And it goes through, it's got a very small but sharp needle that goes through and cuts everything out, letter by letter. Once that's done cutting, our next stage would be bringing it over here. Currently picking out the sign letters right now. We call it weeding or picking or however you want to call it. Next, putting it on the transfer tape. Then after it's taped, we bring it over to the roller. That's where we apply it to the actual sign blank. And we'll roll it through one time just to get the air bubbles out. And the last stage is basically just taking the transfer tape off the front of it. And there's a finished product of the street name sign. We'll take you out to the field and show you our process that we go through. We're gonna go out and follow our sign guys, get something installed for you. This is where we check our underground utilities. Tim, you got AT&T?
AT&T's back here.
Evergy, Google, so we should be good to go. We normally put all of our stuff together out in the field. Then once the base is installed, we'll go ahead and put the post in there. These come up too. Perfect. And that's how we do it. Simple, quick.
Member level. Thank you, Mayor. Great presentation, Ryan. Thank you. Is there any indicator that shows, are we supporting a need? With
you know, they talk about like gym rats, kids that grew up with their dads that were coaches. Like I was a city hall rat. My dad, Tom Lovell, was hired as the Parks Administrator in 1978 and spent 40 years in public service here in Lee Summit. I would go up on the weekends when he was working and I'd run around and play and do things, and I didn't know what he was doing at the time, but I just knew that was part of our weekend routine some days was to go up and hang out at City Hall. Being part of a city from a young age to now in my adult life, you reap so many benefits from that. The people you know, you care more for something that you've been a part of. My wife and I knew we wanted to raise a family. Just trying to find a community that we thought we could raise our children in, that was good to me. And it just felt like the right move as we were deciding on a city to come back to. Fortunate to have started a business in 2018. I founded Level Insurance Group, and we are a business insurance brokerage. So we help businesses procure insurance. Decided to throw our flag in the ground here in Lee Summit, and it's grown. I also have this passion for learning and curiosity, and I started a podcast series. So I really enjoy this opportunity where I sit down with business owners and tell their story, and get this out to other people in hopes that maybe it betters their life and gives them some inspiration or something. It's going to be a really exciting time, and obviously this city is in my blood. My dad's been a part of it for a long time, so I'm really excited. Thank you all. A lot of people would say I was crazy, right? So why do you throw your hand up and subject yourself to going into city politics? I think, especially as I've gotten older, I just felt, maybe a civic duty, like a responsibility to say, hey, this city's been great to me. Here's a way that I can give back and take some of my skills and put them to work for the people of this city. I wanted to bring a different, maybe way of thinking and take some of my business acumen and see areas that it may apply to how we develop and grow this community and just give a different perspective. One of our biggest challenges, but also one of our biggest opportunities is how do we develop and grow this community? We don't want to grow too fast, but we want to grow at a pace that helps support, who and what we are as a community. So, we've got a lot of opportunities, whether that be through development or parks. We've got a lot of land coming on board. So I just think it's important, it's a challenge, but it's also our greatest opportunity. And so we just got to be smart how we do that. It's just asking some different questions. I'm one that, I'm not contrarian for contrarian's sake. What I am is someone will tell me something, and then I want to get to that position with them by just asking thoughtful questions along the way. And then if I can get there, then I feel like we've answered everything we can to move that forward, versus, hey, here's kind of how we've done it. I'm never this is how we do it, this is how we've always done it, and this is how we'll continue to do it. Office of Council Member for District 2. All of my practical experience has put me in this position to serve, and I just raised my hand and said I want to do that. For which I was elected on April 5th, 2022. I feel this obligation to carry this legacy that my dad did, my family did, and then giving my kids an environment to grow up in that makes them want to come back. My kids have started rec sports through the Parks and Recreation system, and I'm watching them play soccer on this sport field that my dad helped develop. And my dad's sitting there with me, right? I mean, that's the stuff that really matters in life.
call to order the Wednesday, September 11th, 2024 Community Economic Development Committee meeting. Can I get a roll call, please?
Chair Level,
Here?
Vice Chair Pryor,
Here.
Councilmember Hodges,
Here.
Councilmember Rader, Planning Commissioner Arth.
Okay, I would look for a motion for the approval of the agenda.
Chair, if I may, before we approve the agenda, is there any opportunity that we can move item B to a little later in the agenda? Chief Snyder's on his way over now.
Oh, really? Yes, that's fine. Where would you like to move it?
To the end.
That's up to you. I would maybe the end.
To the end.
Yeah, we'll just go to the end. Do I need to make a motion to do that or anything? Or, okay. We will move item B, TMP 3087, to follow item F, 2024-6490. With that being said, can I get a motion to approve the amended agenda?
Chair, I move for the approval of the agenda as amended.
Second.
Can I get a roll call vote, please?
Vice Chair Pryor,
Aye.
Councilmember Hodges,
Aye.
Councilmember Rader,
Aye.
Chair Level.
Aye. Do we have any public comments? All right, that will take us to official business, 2024-6466, approval of the August 14, 2024 Community and Economic Development Action Letter. Motion?
Chair,
Yes.
I move to approve the action letter.
Second.
Go to vote, please.
Councilmember Rader,
Aye.
Vice Chair Pryor,
Aye.
Chair Level,
Aye.
Councilmember Hodges.
Aye.
All right, that takes us to item B, TMP 3087, ordinance, oh wait, never mind. We are moving that one to the back. Let's go to item C, 2024-6440, finalized maps for incentive areas, presented by Mr. Johnson.
Thank you. Joshua Raymond Johnson, Director of Development Services. Just wanted to, this is a follow-up from June as well. If you remember at that meeting, we said, hey, we could do some work in our mapping and our incentive policy. We return to you now with the maps. We've worked with IT's GIS department to finish this up. I just wanted to do a quick summary of what we talked about in June and then show you where we're at. I feel like on the mapping side of this, we're kind of at the finish line here. So this is what's in the incentive policy now. This was done presumably in 2017, as the map says. Not proposing many boundary changes to this. In fact, I think only one, and I'll show that to you in a second. And really, this is meant to capture our corridors and our major business areas and some future areas for development. This is the Ignite Comprehensive Plan. Those represent the activity centers and priority corridors from that plan. There's a lot of overlap here, so the basis for this was to really capture all that in the incentive policy so we could really send a signal to people coming to Lease Summit that are doing business on, these are some focus areas we want, this is what we want out of these focus areas, if you will. So we showed you this, hey, this is what's gonna look like if we combine all this, and really what we worked with IT and our GIS department on was to make this look a little more visually pleasing, and with the idea being at the end, we, talk about some completed projects in these areas and then some still existing infrastructure deficiencies that we'd be looking to solve in these areas. So with that, I'll kind of do the grand unveiling here. This was in your packet too. This is a combination of both maps. The areas that kind of have that concrete look, if you will, the hatched area, those are our existing targeted incentive areas. And the areas that are outlined in kind of a more bold color are the activity centers from the comprehensive plan. If you recall from June, the comprehensive plan has good descriptions of what our desire is for a lot of these activity centers. The downtown and the downtown do overlap completely. I don't know if you remember from June, but right now this map is inaccurate. That's in the incentive policy. And so to that end, we've done this, which updates that, and it has our priority corridors from our comprehensive plan. This is View High and the new Longview Activity Center. Again, there's some commonalities here. We're redoing Chipman back there. That's obviously a bonus for this area right now for transportation. And then Sheer Road, if you recall, is targeted for redevelopment as well, expansion and redevelopment through there. This is something I really wanted to highlight. One of our more important comprehensive plan activity centers is this Rock Island Activity Center. It represents the most intense uses that are anticipated. It includes the Rock Island Railroad through here, a future Hook Road interchange, and the realigned Sheer Parkway. So a lot of good stuff happening there. And as you can see, it's near our M291 South incentive area that includes, future Oldham Parkway. Down south here, the Lee Summit Crossing development is now in there as well as a whole array of other developments. So with that, my goal tonight is to let you know that this is where we're at with this, and just getting your kind of sign off, I guess, to finish this up and update the incentive policy. But my proposal would be, this would be, if you're imagining this is a book or a PDF, on one side is this graphic, on the other side is a list of completed projects, what we still need to accomplish in these areas, just for fully descriptive purposes, a narrative about the activity center and what we're trying to accomplish.
Do I have anything, questions or?
I have kind of a question, comment.
Sure.
So when the Rock Island Railroad area there, that was in part of the presentation last night, wasn't it? Of what's going to happen over there. Josh, you weren't.
For the PRI presentation?
Yeah, I think it was the PRI, and they talked about the park. They're going to do trails and everything. David's shaking his head.
Yeah. So the Rock Island Urban Center, that part of that property is predominantly owned by PRI.
Yeah.
So it's predominantly a portion of the PRI property right now. However, the activity center itself was included in the comprehensive plan overall as one of our major activity centers. So it wasn't necessarily PRI specific. They just happened to be the largest landowner in that specific activity center.
Sure. And the Rock Island Railroad is abandoned.
Yeah, there's
Correct?
a multi-use trail.
Right.
on it
Oh,
now.
yes, okay. And so that's really good. That's going to be a really good area over there, I think. Josh, when you said update the incentive policy, so you're just talking about the existing policy that you have right now, and it will be, because there's other updates that need to happen on that. I brought that before Mark Dunning, too, so when you're looking at that.
I don't remember exactly what you had mentioned you brought up to Mark Dunning.
Yeah.
Or maybe, yeah.
I read through it, and it just, I'll revisit with you or him about that, just the things that I saw that I thought we needed to change. And basically, they were projects that we had already completed and different things like that,
Yeah.
that you're going to do all that.
Yeah,
Update
yeah,
that whole thing,
that
so
is-
it's all current. So when we,
So Mark did mention that to me. I just didn't realize that came from you. But a good example of that, a good example of that, something similar to that, is this area right through here, which has been updated on this larger map. If you remember from, well, you may not, in my June presentation, I mentioned this, where Discovery Park curves up and around here at Douglas. That was in the Airport Activity Center. That really didn't have a big connection to the airport. It more had to do with this 470 area through here. So we've adjusted that boundary. That's one example of how we're updating that. But you mentioned the narrative and the completed
I mentioned the
project. Yeah,
narrative,
yeah.
that's just me. The other thing was, on these targeted incentive, so in that, when you update that policy, do you, at that time, is that specific to what it's not specific to exactly what dollar amounts we put in there? It's just, these are just places where we would entertain incentives.
Well, the incentive policy, we can incentivize out of these areas. These are just, I will say, more favorable areas is the way it characterizes those. This doesn't mean this is the only area we would entertain incentivized projects.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Welcome. Anybody else have anything? Targeted areas that we think we would like to see developed. Now, it doesn't necessarily, how granular does it get inside those? Because like I remember Mr. Elam and I talking about something in the Rock Island Center where like what we want to go in there versus like, hey, this is an activity center, right? So like, how does it get more granular as to what we want in there or how that looks, or does it?
It's fairly high level in a lot of the activity center discussions, like in the comprehensive plan. It says something that 4 to 6 story mixed use project, emphasis on office, retail, things of that nature, is as detailed as that gets. Now, that being said, as the comprehensive plan finished up, we did talk about, you know, maybe doing some more master planning for some of these areas.
Okay. So it does at least give more direction as to, hey, here's what we're kind of looking for, here's an incentive map and what we're doing. And then like we had talked about, Mr. Elam, we were talking about that Rock Island area where we had actually had more master planning or something like, you shared with me, I thought it was really neat kind of.
Yeah, so if you
Vision for that
look
area.
in the comprehensive plan, and that's really where the information about the activity centers lies, there is, I'll say, narrative forms of guidelines. There's narrative forms of different design features and things to look for in that at that level. Through a lot of conversations with landowners and developers and things like that, and based off of some past practices, at times when we have, as a city, gone beyond that level, I'll say, and put renderings together and things like that, that has tended to have the opposite impact that we were looking for, and it essentially almost stifled creativity and stifled the development to a certain aspect and kind of created different expectations. So we've gone with this way of providing, I'll say, precedent imagery and things like that that give everybody more of a generalized idea of what the expectations are for that area. However, they are still free to have their kind of design and
Still loose enough where
still
someone
loose
can-
enough,
yeah.
but provide enough guidance so they know that what is going to be within the bounds of what the expectations are.
And then like the comprehensive plan coupled with this, as the EDC gets, the Lee's Summit Economic Development Council gets going, like they have this playbook to help, you know, if someone comes in looking for something, they can go to that area. Yes, there are probably some incentives available. Here's what the city has outlined or at least thought this area would be good for, and start that process.
Yeah, so this actually probably dovetails right into the next conversation that we're going to have about targeted industries as well. So they're really all tied together as from the incentive policy perspective. So just kind of as we look at all of our various planning documents, you know, at the highest level we have our comprehensive plan, that's land use plan and transportation networks and design guidelines and standards for the entire community, kind of at a higher level. And then you go down deeper and get more detailed as you go to these different documents. Our incentive policy is a more narrowly focused set of criteria that is another big indicator that, hey, we're willing to invest, if you will, in this area on a different level. But, you know, it's still in conformance with the comprehensive plan, but there's more detail, more specifics. And then that ultimately leads into, then we've got our UDO for very specific areas. You go into very specific projects and things from there. So the incentive policy being the financial aspect of how, you know, we may participate in a project or not.
Great, thanks. Anybody else? All right, that'll move us on to item D, 2024-6487, discussion on targeted industries by Mr. Elam.
All right. I'm going to attempt something new here and try to just use my Surface. Not work?
Hit your function key in your monitor deal to tell it to
Haven't
expand.
done that yet. All right, well, my apologies. I'm not going to put it on the doc cam. All right. Bear with me just a second. My apologies. Technology did not work for me. I should have come down and tested it. We're going to go different route. Everybody enjoying all of the mouse clicks? All right. Ryan Andrew Elam, Assistant City Manager. I figure we're going formal tonight with full, Ryan Andrew Elam. Yeah. All right, well, thank you. Good evening. Here to talk about targeted industries. And this does fit very well with the conversation that we just had about the targeted areas as it relates to our economic development incentive policy. And this really is an overview of what's currently included in our comprehensive plan and are translated into our incentive policy. And this is, again, a discussion, so feel free to interrupt me at any time. And this was a result of kind of roundtable at the last CEDC meeting saying, hey, let's have a discussion about these targeted industries and where we're at with that overall. So today, our economic incentive policy really does call out specific targeted industries. Calls out professional services, science and technology industries, healthcare, manufacturing, the arts, and entrepreneurship. Now, where did that come from? So that came from a number of different sources. All the way back in 2015, the Lee Summit Economic Development Council did a full market analysis, if you will, and it's called the North Star Study. A copy of that was attached to your packet through there. And again, that's from 2015, 2016 timeframe. So that's 9 years old at this point. Data needs to be updated quite continuously. When we did our comprehensive plan in 2020 and 2021, a big portion of that was looking at economics. So we have an entire chapter element on resilient economics, and part of our consulting team was an economist from St. Louis University that helped us look at the market, look at jobs, look at growth patterns, and come up with where we had strengths as a community and what industries were growing at the time and where we could maybe have some additional impact on capitalizing on those strengths by targeting these specific areas. So what I've included in this presentation here is just kind of an overview of what is in the comprehensive plan. These is all information that's available on our website, igniteourfuture.net, the specific plan element of resilient economy. There's a lot more information in there. But I picked out the things that I think kind of help tell this story of how these targeted industries came to be in there. And you see I've highlighted a few things in there right now, location quotients. So if you remember last month, I talked a little bit about what a location quotient was. And so essentially that's a ratio of how strong that particular sector is in a particular area. And the reason why that's important is because industries tend to cluster together because you end up having different synergies and spin-offs and things like that. So if you think of like Silicon Valley, for example, there's a reason why there's so many tech industries there. They kind of had a critical mass at one point, and that's where that whole industry has kind of grown to go. And so they have these ratios. If you're below 1, you don't have a very strong location quotient in that. You still have some of that, but it might not be a real strength. If you're above 1 in that, then you've got a certain concentration of that industry that makes it more appealing than others. And so you can see here, the highlighting didn't show up very well in this presentation, but you know, our healthcare sector, I think that's pretty obvious to everybody that we have a pretty strong healthcare sector here in Lee Summit, specifically with 3 major hospitals as well as all of the different healthcare options. We have a lot of retail and food service comparatively to the metro, educational services, professional, technical, scientific, and construction. And a lot of these too are 10-year projected job growth rates that you can see in here, that a lot of these are projected to continue to grow. So that was another aspect as to what was a targeted industry, if you will. Is it an industry that is growing, or is it an industry that's in decline? You know, at one point in time, we had a lot of printing in the area. We still might have a high location quotient in printing. However, the projections of that particular industry aren't necessarily as bright as some other industries. So speaking of the projected job growth, you can see these numbers here are a little, I'll say a little dated. Again, the information that was available at the time was from 2017, so really not that much better than the ones from 15 and 16 through there. And a lot of these data points are very lagging indicators on things, but they are used to analyze, to project out. Now you can see at this time we had about almost 42,000 jobs compared to the rest of the county at 332,000. One of the interesting things in the study is that the job growth in Jackson County, Jackson County's got a lot of jobs total. The job growth, though, has been pretty sluggish for the last couple of decades. Whereas, and it's in the report, but we experienced about 60% job growth from 2002 to 2017 or so, where the county was like 4.5% or so. So all that indicates is that we're located in a county that might be experiencing some sluggish growth, probably due to the size in general. However, we as a community haven't necessarily been seeing sluggish growth in our employment. Moving on just to kind of some of the numbers. This is the summary, if you will, the current jobs and the future projected jobs. One of the big implications of the comp plan was to project out what they thought those job numbers would be. All of these projections tie together to go to land use, to floor space, and all those different items and how they play together. So you can see, expecting about a 20% increase in commercial square footage and items there, with a big emphasis in healthcare, industry and manufacturing, and professional science and technology. This is that same chart, only it's expanded out to include kind of the square foot estimates and kind of the additional square footage needed to accommodate those projections. So again, I caveat all of this with, these are all projections. So they're going to change. It's based off of science, and it's based off of the best information available. It's based off of, we've got a strong presence now. If we really go into that, we can continue to grow that sector. And then if we're going to do that, what physical space demands and space needs do we have, can we expect out of that, so that we can make sure that we're trying to balance those. One of the other things with our targets, and that the study indicated, was that we do have a pretty good diversity of jobs and diversity of sectors, and that's really what we're wanting to do as well. If you look at the goals from the strategic plan and the comp plan for strategic economic development, you know, it's implementing economic development plans, focusing recruitment and retention efforts, define and plan for a diversified economic base. So that defining and planning for a diversified economic base was kind of also at the heart of some of these targets. So how'd that get into the incentive policy? Our incentive policy it starts with an economic development vision through here, and this is just clipped straight from our policy there. And you can see that we're looking to promote downtown educational excellence, cultural heritage, high quality jobs and targeted businesses. And so in the whole goal there, with the tax base to grow, to ensure continued ability to deliver an outstanding quality of life and services. We reviewed this a couple of years ago, maybe not even a couple of years ago, maybe it was about 18 months ago or so. And there really wasn't a desire to change any of the vision of that, but there was a full review of these aspects. Sorry, I thought I had a copy of what had the actual amendment date on there. But underneath there too, that area highlighted in bold, the areas focus on how the community should develop through that investment in downtown, Lee Summit entrepreneurship redevelopment, the attraction and the retention of targeted businesses and jobs. So again, that tells us how we're going to look into this. And then we have our strategic direction associated with that. The outcomes or goals, they've been created to inform investors of what is desired by the development that may make use of incentives. So again, this is how we're getting now. We got to the how, now we're getting into the what is desired. And we have a specific section there that's targeted outcomes with attracting and retaining targeted businesses. You can see we're currently enjoy residential base, highly educated, highly skilled individuals. We're looking to create employment opportunities that allow those individuals to advance their careers within Lee Summit. So that is a priority. Matching up our workforce and our residents with jobs that are equal. We also seek economic sectors that have strong growth potential in the future. That's where a lot of the targets that currently exist came from. A lot of strong growth potential. And we're looking to be a regional hub that provides fertile environment for professional services, science and technology, healthcare, manufacturing, the arts, and entrepreneurship. Now we go on a little bit further to say that to be considered a targeted business, they got to create that environment where opportunities exist to support family households. It's very specific in there. A big measure that's used for that is the average county wage and percentage above the average county wage. The average county wage is actually a figure that you can find through MERIC, the Missouri Economic Research Institute. It's published, so we get that information and we compare that as well. I believe the average county wage right now is around $33 an hour, $34 an hour or so, something like that. That's for an individual job. That's not the average household wage. That's about the average individual wage. And so, again, it talks through that right there. So in the policy as well, we have these additional policy statements. And so really this comes into how we consider the targeted businesses within the current confines of the existing policy. Really, it's a general policy statement that says most favorable consideration is given to projects that cause the construction of facilities which are targeted businesses in accordance with the strategic direction of the incentive policy. So what's that mean? So that means that we are sending the indication out to the community, to the developers, that if you are one of these industries, we are more likely to participate from an incentive perspective than if you are not one of these industries. Our entire policy is set up to be completely legislative approval and complete legislative discretion. We do not have anything in the policy that would be, I would say, an incentive by right, more of an entitlement incentive. That does not currently exist in our policy. We do have guidelines in the policy. There's a table that has different levels of investment, different targeted areas, and different tools. And the policy does allow for the option of, if somebody fits within those guidelines, within those policies, to go straight towards more implementation documents and not necessarily come forward with a conceptual presentation. Now, you all have seen a lot of conceptual presentations. Again, that conceptual presentation is that developer's opportunity to come in and say, hey, we are meeting policy statements 1, 2, and 3, but our request is above your policy threshold. So now we're coming in and requesting that additional more. We have no prohibition against it. It's actually a process that we get a lot of compliments on from developers as they're going through the process in our community and in different communities as well. So that was a lot of information, high level. I kind of skimmed the top of it, hoping that we can have a conversation now about questions related to the targeted industries and where you want to take the conversation from here. And I don't have a fancy slides question, so I can move it around if you want.
Ms. Rader?
Okay,
Oh,
here I
there we
go. Okay, I understand, looking at the slides, number 4, page 4, we're basing the job sector in Lee Summit on the 2017 U.S. Census Bureau. And so I'm sure these things have changed, but I think basically, first of all, Ryan, that was really a lot of information, and I wrote notes here, and I don't even know how to ask all these questions, but since I've been, so we put our comprehensive plan in place in 2020. Is that correct? Was it 19 or 20?
21.
Okay, 21. And so, tell me time-wise, what typically we expect once we put our comprehensive plan, or strategic plan in place? Or is it just a constant process all the time with changing things so that we're, so people know that this is what we're looking for? But do you know where I'm going with this? So it's like, how long does it take before we start getting more jobs? Because we are sadly lacking in jobs, and many of the jobs that we're getting are minimum wage jobs because they work at the stores that are coming in and things like that, and not ones that are manufacturing, industry, Class A, commercial businesses that are coming in. So, I mean, I know it's economy driven, it's economic driven too, I understand that. But I mean, what typically do we, from your experience, should we expect for for developers to really start coming in and looking at Lee Summit as a viable place for their business? Answer that?
Well, yeah. So the answer is it takes a long time. I mean, just the real answer is it takes a long time, and it's highly competitive for different industries and different things. But I'll also say that it's my opinion that we've actually done quite a bit in the time that this has been in place. Specifically, if you go back all the way to the incentive policy itself and look at kind of what's happened as a result of that. And a lot of that is just a result of the policies and a result of the planning. And a lot of the industrial space that we've got, for example, just even 8 years ago, we didn't have any new industrial space. We probably have, I'm going to say, 1.2 million square feet right now. And that's might be a little light. And we've got more that's coming online that has been built and is open. And it takes there's a lengthy construction period for that stuff to come online as well from an industrial perspective. I can think of as well the Reinhardt Food Services or PFG Food Services that expanded operations here. I can think of HD Solutions that has expanded operations here. Those are pretty big wins. I can think of some other companies that have come into existing space and maybe bought a space and then realized, oh, they're growing so fast they need to buy another space and buy another space. Not all of those perhaps come before council because they're existing space and they're going into maybe Class B or Class C space. I think of a construction company that I actually just met with. They moved over from KCK, and they came to the area because of the reputation of the area, and they'd been in KCK for 90 years, I think. And they took a building that just happened to become available because that company that built that building grew too much. Now they left and went somewhere else, unfortunately. So there's a lot that goes into a lot of those decisions. But as far as how long is a comprehensive plan good for example,
Well,
I mean, that's kind of the
10 years, right?
basis.
10 years.
10, 20?
It should be 20,
yeah.
but things are changing so
Things
quickly.
change
All the
fast.
time, the trends are just so different. And then you said, thank you for that explanation. And so then you said, I'm asking you, how are we sending ourselves out? Isn't this part of what we want our EDC to participate in? And are there other things that we do as the city that we're sending out to, all points bulletin out there to the world that we welcome you and And we would love to entertain you being here in Lee Summit. How does that work?
Yeah, so some of that is a traditional role that an economic development corporation fills, an economic development organization fills. I'll say from our perspective on the city side, we're through the KCADC and through those different things, we're still responding to requests for information, and we all have our own opinions about that process overall. But really, I think there's a lot that can be done. There's definitely more that could be done on there on different things. However, I think really one of the big things that probably doesn't get talked about a lot, at least publicly, is our reputation. Our reputation. When anybody comes to the market area, they're always talking to the economic developers, and they're always talking to the brokers and all of those folks that do business in the area. I think we've got a pretty good reputation. We've been consistent. Our process is easy to follow, and really that's one of the main things that they're looking for. Is they're looking for what's the process, what's the consistency, how many unknowns can they check off the box before they come talk to us on different things. I just went to the Governor's Conference on Economic Development and was talking to some folks from DED and site selectors and things like that. And the whole name of the game from that side of it is it's a process of elimination. They're just looking for reasons to eliminate you. But that's the way that it works. And I went last year and I was talking to them too, and they were saying that they've got maybe a 10% hit rate on projects when they come through the door, through that RFI process and things like that. But it's the small businesses, it's the reputation, it's the discussion at the local level that really helps foster that environment of growth and those different opportunities. And so it's a long game.
Yeah, I know it's a long game because the wheels of government turn slowly and development turns slowly. Typically, it's a lot of years before. I mean, you buy a piece of land and it's 2 years before you can even get it up and going. So, and I totally agree with you on reputation. Just saying, and being in the industry that I'm in for 30 years and bringing families here, that was one good thing, was our schools, and the reputation that we had here as a community was always something that was easy to sell here. So thank you very much for all that.
Chair,
Chair.
could I add to the discussion a point that, in addition to everything that Ryan just mentioned, I think I've talked to this body, but it was different people from time to time, and sometimes to the city council. The unique perspective that I can bring to this is I used to be the Economic Development Council for a lot of the cities in the Kansas City region and a lot of cities on this side of the state in Missouri, all the way down to Springfield and Branson, some of those cities. And I can tell you that having done that work for a lot of cities, 6 years ago, it was 6 years ago this month that I came back in-house. At that point in time, and I think it's continued for the entire time I've been in-house with the city, Lee Summit is sort of at the forefront of this work. There's a lot of cities that I work for that the volume of projects that we have, even the projects that have received preliminary approval, we've been talking about this at the council meetings a bit more, which is there's a number of projects that have been approved, but they're sort of waiting in the wings until inflation comes back down and they can fire up and get get a favorable loan for the project. So I think there's a lot of projects that are sort of waiting in the wings for a better economic climate that have been approved to some degree by the city council. But I can say with a high degree of confidence that Lee Summit is doing great in comparison to our competitors, our surrounding cities. That was the case when I came back in-house, and I believe that's still the case today. After having gone through COVID and the economic, the inflation cycle that we've been through, just look at the volume of projects that we have and look at how many projects we have that are, like I said, waiting in the wings to develop, and you're continuing to see more. You'll have another big project come forward by the end of the year, and we've talked about that. And you've received conceptual presentations on some of these, and they'll move forward. And I think Lee Summit is doing great in this environment. And yes, it does take a long time, but Lee Summit probably moves as efficiently or more efficiently than any other city that we would call a competitor.
And not to continue this, but apparently I like to talk about this too. I think with economic development in general, there are so many different variables that go into it, and there's so many different ways to measure success. It's really hard to pinpoint one specific action or one specific attribute that is the cause of that. In fact, I don't think it's possible. I think it's a multivariable situation, and it's the combination of all of those things working together, a lot of those indirect things, that really result in success. So for me, it's interesting how individuals define success in this area, in this arena, because this sounds very cliche, but very sports oriented, if you will. I look at development as like the ultimate team sport. It takes so many different areas of expertise, but not only that, it takes all of the support around it to make things work. Think of a football team, for example. You've got 11 players on offense, 11 players on defense, but then you've got 150 coaches and assistants and things doing different things in order to make the organization work, things that you never even see or hear about. I kind of equate development and economic development to that in general.
I'll add one additional thought to that. It's kind
Don't
of
get David and I talking about
the
this.
tag team. I would say that the number one quality that we have going for us, and I think this is always the case at the city level, the state level, at the federal level, it's the quality of the people involved.
I just hope that everybody out there in TV land heard all this, because it was really good stuff, and we get asked these questions all the time from the public. It's just like, why isn't this happening? Why isn't this happening? Why aren't the, so hearing it all from you guys, I think it just helps. I mean, maybe somebody will watch it, but it still is helpful for me too. So I appreciate all that. And I love that you love Lee Summit. It's great.
Well, and on that too, we do have a lot more that we can do, and a lot more that we want to do, just as not only as a city, but as the economic development organization gears up to do a lot of things. We got a lot of potential in a lot of different areas.
Well, and the thing of it is that I like is that we are being proactive. We're seeing it, and then we're recognizing what's out there, seeing trends, and then acting on them. And I like that. I want to do more, because that's me. I just always want to be doing more, and I know you guys are on board with that. So I appreciate all that. Thank you.
No. So the only thing I would say is, so I'm looking at the targeted industries list. We have professional services, science and technology, healthcare, manufacturing, the arts, and entrepreneurship. And not that anything outside of that we wouldn't look at, figuring out. But I also think if we really wanted to attract, and some of it is just, I don't want to say it's luck, but it's like, what are we really strong at, and what do we really have, and then what best fits that industry, and then how do we take and use what we have to attract those industries or businesses. I think we've got a really good opportunity to be a leader in kind of aeronautics, with a lot of the stuff going on at the airport and our working with the school district and all of those things. And so then you say, okay, there's something where we're educating people. We might turn a lot of pilots out of the city. What are we doing at the airport? And you're starting to see some of that stuff start to steamroll. You talk about Silicon Valley, was there anything really in particular that created that hub? Well, someone went there, a lot of talent went there, and then all of a sudden you see it kind of grow from there. I look at Overland Park and you see all these Class A offices and buildings, and you see all the professional services and synergies that are down there. And so we've always said, well, we want professional services. Well, chicken or the egg, are you going to go build a giant Class A office space? Who's going to invest in that? And do you have the employer to do it? But I look at, so then I say, well, what areas could we really capitalize on? And if we wanted to, as a body or a city, to hone in on some of those things, to say hey, here's the things we're looking for. Maybe we already are in a lot of ways, because some of the things I think we're doing at the airport are just starting to attract people out there to want to do stuff in the development. But I think construction, and I think of manufacturing, I think of the PRI land, and maybe we have and working with the EDC, maybe there is what would make a construction company, it's got 50 employees or whatever, however, come to Lee Summit you know, they've got land costs, they've got to build it, but are there payroll tax incentives? Are there things that we could do to drive that kind of work there? And do we even want to do that? And do we get real granular about it? So I guess that's the thing, and it's just more me kind of just conceptualizing ideas of how we could do that, and that would be in concert with the EDC and some of those things. But like, you know, I would love to see us figure out a way to advertise some of those things a little bit more in concert with the EDC or EDO or whatever that might be, and maybe have more of a white paper on what that looks like and what we could do, still knowing that it's got to go through the legislative body to do that. But, you know, if we really wanted to make a push in those areas, we should be doing more to shout it from the rooftops, especially like we talked about with aeronautical stuff. I don't know if that's a question really or more of a comment, but like looking at those, I would say manufacturing, those are jobs that are high-paying jobs. I think you will see a trend in this country to remanufacturing. Like, we're going to bring back a lot of manufacturing, so I think opportunities to create places for people to, you know, build their manufacturing offices. And again, with all this land, if we have some of those set for industrial, it's like, hey, by the way, if you want to come here, we've got this targeted. Like, we've got some great incentives to bring your business and build your building. Like, we should be working with PR edited, which I think we are. I'm not saying we're not. Same thing with construction. I think construction's still an industry. I think we could lead in the trades and couple that with some of the, MIC that does some trades. Don't we have a trade school here, or are we doing anything with the trades, or?
There's a workforce alliance that is working through some of that stuff. I think there's different apprenticeship programs and things like that. If I may, a few things to where we really do need outside help on a lot of that, just because of the role that we have to play on different things, as well as the availability of certain tools. You mentioned a payroll tax, for example.
I don't even know if that we can do that, but.
Well, I mean, we as a city don't have control over any payroll tax, right? Yeah, and so that takes a different
Is that state?
Enabling body, yeah.
So there are some state incentives that basically the incentive, that the revenue source that's generated from the incentive is a diversion of that, but at the state level. And with the exception of one project that came through the city 15 years ago, I don't think the city has ever really pursued too much in the way of state incentives. But we are, for the downtown project right now, we're going to MDFB next week for an incentive request that we renewed last month for that project as an example. That's one example where we are pursuing a state incentive, but not the type of incentive you just mentioned. And so one of the points is, as you and the council start to evolve in this area and think more about what you want to do, and this is something that Ryan can talk more with you about, let us know what you want to do, what you want to target, and we can come up with some options on how to do that. And I can look into, options and packages that would work both at the local and state level, given our knowledge of all these tools.
Yeah, and I think what would be interesting to me versus like where we incentivize property is more of a real estate transaction than like, because we've done that a little bit with some of our industrial, like our warehousing, which is more like, hey, we need to just build some warehousing and then we'll have some tenants come into it. Is like, could we those real estate abatements might work, but can we get like an owner operator to come in, utilize those things and bring anyway.
Yeah, so there's lots of opportunities with that. A lot of those tools though are state tools. And so they're tools that we currently don't have available to us specifically to control.
Well, we have the real estate tools.
We have the real estate
tools. Yeah,
tools.
so that's what I was saying, like, even if we went away from some of those state tools, but again, like, and again, I think this is in concert with like the EDC, is like, hey, go find an owner operator and like, we have this land and we have some tools and bring them in versus like a real estate group builds a industrial, we give them the proper tax abatement, we hope they fill it with some tenants, but it's mostly like warehousing jobs. You see what I'm saying? So like if we wanted a manufacturer or we wanted a contractor or something like that. So anyway, I don't want to just keep rambling on, but.
Well, if I could add just two other things. So I mentioned last month when we kind of started talking about this, about a document called the Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy. And so the Mid-America Regional Council is designated as the planning region for federal dollars and federal purposes for Kansas City area. We're a part of that. Every 5 years, they produce a document called a CEDS, Comprehensive Economic Development Strategic Plan. That is utilized to be in concert with the EDA, the Federal Economic Development Administration's overall policies, goals, and objectives. And as part of that research, they do a lot of the targeted, or kind of the location quotient, the baseline economic data, and everything that we can utilize as well to get even more specific on different things. Mark is currently in the process of accepting public comment on that document. I believe that the public comment is open till the end of this week. The state is also doing a statewide CEDS, and so there's a website available that has information on the statewide CEDS. They are doing all of the same stuff kind of at that state level. That is projected to be complete next September, September of 2025. I say all that because these are important documents and things for us to be aware of and plugged into so that we can then take and continue to shape and modify some of our targets, update our information, and kind of have that cascading effect and make sure that we're in alignment. Now, if we do a lot of that too, there may be opportunities for additional funding and things like that through the federal government, but we got to work up through the systems in place in order for that to really come to fruition. But immediately, we can take advantage of their data.
Thank you. So I know a while back we were kind of discussing maybe an internal position that kind of covered a lot of this that wouldn't take place of the EDC but would work with the EDC. Are we still thinking about that? Do you know what I'm talking about? Not take place, that like an internal position that would help with targeted industries.
So I know a long time ago, even before my time, as they created the development center and different things, there was a thought of potentially having an economic development manager that was in-house. I don't think that position ever came to fruition overall. I would say that that's an option if the council wanted to pursue that, but as of right now, we don't have any expansion plans to request an in-house economic development manager.
Do you think it would be beneficial?
I can tell you from my workload right now, it might be helpful for me.
I feel like remember when it wasn't too long ago, we kind of discussed a little bit, like, I don't know, I think it would be beneficial.
I think it's worth looking into, and again, I think that all depends on goals and how what outcome we're expecting to achieve out of that, and how we're measuring success overall.
I think it would add a lot to our city if that's something we want to discuss further.
Yeah, I think part of that will be fleshed out with what the EDC's role and responsibility will be, and then do we need a liaison internal even with that?
And I will say I did touch base with the EDC about this presentation, so that they were aware they had something come up to where they couldn't be here, but we have had a little bit of dialogue about carrying the conversation on targeted industries forward, and I know that you now sit on that board, council member level.
Thanks. Did you have?
I was just going to say that I see that as, not to disagree with Councilmember Pryor, but I see that as a position of the president of the EDC is someone that should be going out and doing that type of thing. So we'd want to make sure we had somebody strong in that position. But I was just going to say, on top of all that, would it be impossible for the council to get together and say, here's what we want to have you do, or have us all do, and say, these are the industries and these are the companies and these are the businesses that we would like to see come into Lee Summit, and then we work together as a council to contact these people? Does that sound out of the realm of
Well, I think that would be the direction you give to the EDC and then that person actually reaches out, markets,
Right,
does
I mean-
everything, and then I don't think we should be, I don't know that they necessarily
We
want
should- well,
us
Mia
reaching out.
calls
I can
them.
tell
Mia
you,
calls
I've
them.
done a lot of that,
Yes.
and so has Councilmember Hodges. It takes a lot of time and it takes a lot of meetings. So, and out of all of the people that we've kind of pursued, we've been successful with one of them. But yeah, it takes.
It's not out of the realm of impossible, though.
No, and also the position that I was mentioning, it overlaps with the EDC, kind of how I understood it. It overlaps, but it definitely doesn't take place of the LSEDC. It's more of a work together as
Cooperating.
somebody
Yeah.
designated within the city to kind of be that person that works with them. So, yeah.
Okay.
Is there anything you needed from us on this, other than like more direction or what? I was trying to think of.
Well, again, this was just in a response to, you wanted to have a conversation
Right.
about it. If there are changes to the policy that you'd like considered or things like that, we could take some direction on that.
Let's take this information as we're working with the EDC, see what we come up with, and then if there's, like, we as a body decide we want to try and get a little more granular with these and some incentives or whatever, we'll bring it back.
Great.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry.
I will just also say that I follow a lot of businesses in Kansas, and a lot of them, especially a lot of the bigger ones, get star bonds. So I really wish the state of Missouri would step up and do something like a star bond in Kansas, because I feel like that would attract a lot on the Missouri side of the state.
Thank you. Okay, this will take us to.
And if anybody's looking for a little light reading, Chapter 3.3 of the Comprehensive Plan, the plan element for resilient economy.
Why don't you print that out for us and
I can do that.
put it in our council mailboxes, and, because I check that all the time. You're right. All right, that'll take us to item 2024-6489, discussion on the amendments to Article 2, Article 7, and Article 8 of the UDO pertaining to the review process and building material requirements. Ms. Nassif.
Good evening, Amy Nassif, Deputy Director of Development. Get this up here for you. Oh. Hello, Elizabeth Nassif. It's better than what it was supposed to be. It was supposed to be Noel Nassif, because I'm born on Christmas. So I'm born on Christmas Day, sidebar. And I grew up on Norwich
Yeah, I'm the
Court.
26th, all right.
Oh, yeah. So I'm.
Yours is worse than mine.
Yeah, and I grew up on Norwich Court, so it would have been Noel Nassif on Norwich Court, like Cat in the Hat. And so I'm really glad that they did not. I'm glad my mom won that argument. So this evening here to talk about some updates that we'd like to make to the Unified Development Ordinance, some process improvements, which really kind of ties into the reasons we're here with the comprehensive plan, and our strategic plan also ties into economic development and being that attractive place for developers to come. Always looking at efficiencies that we can make to our process. So there's 3 areas we wanted to broach with you tonight. There's the final development plan extensions, everyone's favorite, building materials, the use of metal in specified metal areas, and modification requests. And we'll take those one at a time for you. So the first is final development plan extensions. Currently, our code, and for many, many years, our UDO has that final development plans are actually approved administratively. Because at the time of that comes, zoning is done, the preliminary development plans are finished, council has given us the direction on what the requirements are. So final development plans are approved administratively. They do not go to planning commission or city council. However, extensions do. And so by having an extension come to city council, that makes anywhere from a 3-week process instead of just 3 days. And it also has you all approving an extension for a plan that you did not see in like that first regard. And so many cities, locally and not locally, actually have that a 6-month or even a 12-month extension is done administratively as well, since the plan itself is done administratively. So what we were wanting to discuss tonight is your thoughts on if an extension that comes through, just for 6 months period, could be done administratively. And then anything beyond that, if they wanted to have 12 months, and 12 months is, right now what they could do. So if they wanted to have 12 months, that would go to the governing body. Currently, if someone comes in for an extension, after a FDP is about to approve, the governing body can also add any additional, attach new conditions if there's new code requirements. We have that in here also, that staff would have that authority to do that as well. So just wanted to get your thoughts on that possible. And again, so it doesn't happen very often. We've had 3 in the last year and a half. We're going to have 1 or 2 upcoming in the next couple weeks actually for you all. And usually it's just one extension that folks need, and it doesn't tend to be over that 12-month period anyway. So happy to answer any questions.
First. I don't know, I'll ask you this, and then I've got another thing that, I don't know if this is a place to ask it, but I think that, okay, so we have to leverage our workload, right? And so I think anything that can be streamlined and make it easier for the developers, the builders, anyone that's doing a project, it's gonna save money in the long run. And anything that we can do to expedite it and make it simpler, if we make a decision to say, okay, you guys have the latitude to take this and run with it, then I say hip, hip, hooray. And then I want to say this, and this is something I've been thinking about for a while. In our permitting, with our permits, thinking about how to save money and streamline them, do we, and maybe, well, I don't know, you might know the answer to this, Amy, but do we, when builders come in and they present a floor plan to you, and it's the same floor plan over and over and over and over and over again, do we have a system whereby that plan can be approved and that's the end of it and they move on, as long as they make no alterations whatsoever? Wouldn't that be an easier way to streamline the permitting than to have them wait another, 6 weeks to, okay, go ahead.
Yes. So there is something that's been in the Kansas City Metro for about the last 2.5, maybe even 3 years. It's been trending, is that pre-approved plan set for permits, especially for residential, and more specifically even for single family. And so I don't know if that's specifically the area you're talking about, but
Yes,
it might be. Okay.
pretty much, yeah.
And so there's been many cities that have even gone as far as getting consultants and stuff to draw up those pre-approved plan sets. We have talked about that internally as we've done all of our housing initiatives over the last 6 to 9 months. And the interesting thing is that we currently are, I'm going to brag a little bit, we're currently one of the leaders in getting those done already and being so efficient. Our turnaround time for residential is just a couple days. And so 90% of the cities who are doing those pre-approved plan sets are because their general review time is several weeks. And so having that pre-approved plan set lets you get done, in just that few day time frame. Now, it's still something that we're tossing around and seeing if there's ways that would move the needle and be significant improvement for us here. But as of yet, and unless Ryan feels differently or Josh does, that's kind of where the conversations have gone. And we were just kind of punting back and forth with staff of, if we do this, what are we really accomplishing, since we're already kind of one of the top and one of the most efficient in the metro for the review time sequence.
If I can just add 2 quick things. On the concept of, reusing plans from one place to another, you take a house plan, for example, you move it and put it on a different lot. The civil in me is going to tell you that's different because your conditions around that are all different. So there are definitely changes that need to be made. The building could be 99% the same, but there's a chance there's probably going to be something that needs to be looked at, as well as copyright issues and things like that. Now, we do have, and we have in the past, I'm not sure if it's any different, but if they get the same architect to sign and seal a new plan that's specific for that lot, and they say same as, we'll review it as such, and it does cut down on the review time. But I'll go ahead and say it, that There is not a single house in Lee Summit that's getting a 6-week delay because of our review time period. If there's a 6-week delay in a plan set, then that's not ours.
Well, I'm just going to say, that was kind of the reason I brought it up, because a builder that I was working with, and maybe he wasn't telling the truth.
It could have been also that maybe there were comments and review comments, and so, they're happy to talk about that
Yeah.
offline with you as well, if there's a specific case.
So typically, are we turning them around? What's typical, 3
It's
weeks?
3
Okay.
days.
3 days.
It's 3 days.
Oh, okay,
No,
yay.
it's 3 days.
Okay.
That's what I,
More
when
of
I
that.
said, yeah. And now
Okay.
that is and that is the review period for residential. Now, there could be a comment or two that we then need back from someone, but we are getting those comments or the approval done. They are hearing from us within a 3-day time frame.
Okay, that's awesome. Yeah,
Okay, thank you.
thank you.
So, I mean, to me, this seems like a no-brainer, in my opinion. And I like the idea that, if something were to change in that extension, like, some ordinance changes or something that would change, that you guys have the opportunity to go back and do that. So I think anything that empowers you guys to do your jobs faster, more efficiently than coming back to us just for an extension for something you had already approved seems like a pretty good change. Any unintended outcomes that might spawn from something like this, that someone could game the system for any reason. I'm just trying to think, I always try to think of, like, what's the unintended outcome from doing this, other than just speeding you guys up and giving you the power to move.
No, we do that too when we're writing code. I call it webbing. I try to web all the different scenarios and pros and cons for everyone. And if something does come up that I've never heard of, in past cities too, then definitely we'll be back before you and we'll change it.
All right.
For sure.
Well, I think general rule of thumb is our blessing
Yeah.
here. So.
And they also, if we, for some reason, we don't approve it or there's something like that, they do have that appeals process too to come back through.
So, given the feedback, is there any discussion on the 6 versus 12 months on the extension? I think as we were talking through this, it was originally 12 months for the extension with governing body approval. And we were kind of thinking, all right, maybe 12 months for staff approval would be a little bit too long for the council, but if you're comfortable with it, we're definitely comfortable with a 12-month approval, having to go back, if that was something you'd entertain.
Franklin is 2 years extension.
We'd also
Yeah.
take 24 months.
Ryan, are we talking about like what happened over there at Staggs Field? Our conversation about that, remember, was it, but that was
no.
2 years. That was,
Yeah.
this is different.
That was
Yeah,
different.
this is
This is
different. So let's use Staggs Field as an example for this. So they came in, they had their preliminary development plan. They went ahead and submitted a final development plan. So what happened is they let that final development plan expire on there. This would allow them to seek an administrative approval to get an extra 12 months for that plan to be valid. But then after that, it would have to go to the governing body to get approval for the extension. Right now, they can seek that 12-month extension, but they have to get the governing body to approve that for that specific plan. That scenario was that they let it expire,
Yeah.
and so there's no final development plan on there. But the preliminary development plan is still valid. So that's a big consideration and a big difference here. This has nothing to do with the preliminary development plan. If they're at this point, then that preliminary development plan is already locked in because they've submitted a final development plan. So it's kind of keeping the processes separate a little bit. So the concern was the preliminary development plan in that situation, not the final development plan.
Okay, that's right, that's right. I don't know, do you guys?
And like I said, we've only had maybe we only get 2 or 3 a year.
I think
2 or 3 a year, and it's already 12 months right now currently, so it's just changing who would be signing off on it.
Oh,
Maybe six months and then discuss it further at council?
So that's where I think you guys are writing it right, is that you have the ability to grant 6 months, and then if they need any more than that, they'd have to come back to us. So what they're saying is can we give one extension of 12 months versus 6 months, 6 months. 6 months, then it has to come back to us. But if it went over 12, it would definitely come back to us. So this is saying like, all right, we'll give you a 12-month extension on this final development plan that, right? And that allows you to go forward with that. Within that, because it's getting ready to expire, correct? And so we're granting you the ability to extend them 12 months without having to come back to us.
Correct, and they would have
How
to.
long
they
is the
would-
current waiting period from a final development plan? So could it be sitting there for 2 years and then they need 6 months or 12 months?
No, right now, so final development plans are only valid for a 12-month period right now, and they get the one renewal for the 12 months at city council.
Okay.
So it would just be 12 months at staff instead.
And so like that means like there's no shovels in the ground, there's no dirt moving, right? And so like they
That's
pulled
correct.
permits and started working, so.
Yeah.
And this is commercial, residential,
Anything.
any-
What triggers the final development plan being locked in is if they've started, the substantial construction has commenced, and so this would be those times when they haven't started yet.
I'm okay with the 12 months, but I'm open to whatever. I mean,
what could come back to haunt us? What could happen that would, you know what I mean? Stuff comes back, you make a decision, then you're like, oh, gosh.
The ones that have been requested in front of you, all the ones that have come in have all been approved for the 12-month time. And then also just having the ability to, if the code has changed, if you want your extension, we're going to add in those new conditions. That language provides that security as well to make sure.
and is that language, let's say if the code has changed in that extension, do you get the ability to just decide whether you want to enforce the code or not enforce the code with that extension? Or does that force them to come back to us and say, like, the code's changed?
They would only come back,
Yep.
so if we approved it, and say a code requirement has changed, we would condition the extension on the fact that they would have to meet that new code requirement.
But it's not subjective, like, you don't get the choice of
No.
whether to, okay.
Just like now, there's no choice either.
Okay. So if the code changes, something new changes, they're required.
And then it's only one extension, so
One.
you only get the one.
I'm
one
good
and
with
done.
12 months.
I think,
Yeah. Oh,
Chair, I can add one other thought to the point that you were just making, which is we have encountered some odd situations where a project has an approved PDP and then it doesn't happen for a number of years. And there's been such an extended time period that the building code has changed. And so the question is, what building code do we apply? And we apply the one that's in effect when they make the application. They don't get to look back a decade or 8 years and say, I want to build according to that code. No, it's the code in effect today when they make the application.
have you stated your middle name yet?
It's Wiley.
Okay. Are you guys good with this then? So it'll come back to us as 12 months and,
Yes.
okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, so
On to the
moving
next.
right along.
I was just
sorry.
gonna say, actually on that, I guess just process question. When you say come back to you, are you wanting this to come back?
No,
to
I mean, it'll come back as
Full
a.
council? Full
Oh,
council?
Right,
Yeah,
you'll write
okay.
it up and, yeah.
Just wanted to make sure, because UDO amendments are a little bit different than other ordinance amendments, because we take them here at CEDC and we discuss them, talk through them, we kind of work through some of the details and the implications of it, and then they actually go to the planning commission.
Okay.
And then the planning commission.
Oh, boy.
Provides a recommendation that then goes to the full city council.
Gotcha.
So.
I'm kidding. I was there too.
So the second one for tonight is the use of metal as an architectural material. So quick quiz or fun fact for you, since 2019, we have had 35 requests to use metal and 35 have been approved. So it's something that Planning Commission has asked us about, Development Community has asked us about, it's even come up here at CEDC and with staff, is we obviously have a section in our code that we need to update. So right now, the use of metal can only be done as just a trim and very small amount, it's like an accent. And it's only also allowed then in specified metal building locations. And those are some of our industrial areas. So there's definitely opportunities to improve that. Now, we are working with getting an architectural consultant, planning consultant on board to update codes and things, but this is just a great way to just kind of stop the reoccurring having to come back to Planning Commission, City Council. It's a 12-week process right now, even for the smallest amount, the use of metal. And when every single request is being approved, then that's a time for us to look at our processes. And so this is just a red line version for you that's in your packet. What we're basically recommending here is that metal can be used, but not to exceed 40%. The reason we got the 40% was from reviewing those 35 projects that have come before you since 2019. They have all had requests for use of metal anywhere from 7% up to 98%. And the average has been around 50. So looking at that and then how the use of architectural metal right now can be done, we're recommending that metal can be done just not to exceed 40% of that building facade. And then anything beyond that would have to go to Planning Commission. And so then the other areas in here are just a little bit of housekeeping cleanup. There's a little bit of just confusing language on some of the side and rear facade requirements. Section D here, this is just where it talks about that specified metal building location map that we have in the code right now that we would be striking out and removing. And then the rest of it is cleanup language also to help clarify like conditional materials and things like that. So I'm happy to answer any questions. These are like the 4 areas of cleanup that it would result in. So it's removing the specified metal building location map. It's allowance for the use of up to 40% of metal on the facade, which is less than what the average is that we're seeing. And then updating those requirements for the industrial buildings. Right now it just talks about districts, so it should be more related to the building. And then just cleanup of the material, so it's easier to read. And again, all this will probably be worked on even further when we start writing the code, but for right now, it'll save a lot of time and some efficiencies with having to keep coming before for a 12-week process. And I'm happy to answer any questions or go over anything else with the red line, or if you want to see the map or anything, I have that as well.
Raider.
I'm curious today. On the drive it, back there, you had the drive it underlined. Was that just adding drive it on there? Yeah, the one before that.
Nope, it's
Including
been in there
drive it?
forever. That's just the PDF thought it was a typo for how it's spelled. So it's
okay.
always been in there
All
with the
right,
EFS.
Okay, now, Amy, I went back and I looked at the June 12th meeting and I listened to it, and there was a reference to the consultant. I just wanted to know, I guess I didn't ask at the time, how, to be more specific on why we're hiring the consultant and what they're supposed to do, what they're supposed to do in particular.
Sure. So we're going to be working with and going contract for a consultant to help us rewrite our UDO requirements for architectural design and building materials for any type of building throughout the city. And this is a result of comments and questions and desire of the City Council over the years, CEDC, even some Planning Commission comments. Staff also has some things that we want to be looking at. It's to help our process to be more transparent and clear in our requirements and expectations. Also, to really get a more significant areas of like use of materials and what our expectations are. We're very lucky and blessed to have some excellent high quality development here in Lee Summit. But having those expectations in our code will help, especially as we get developers from out of town or not, folks who don't usually work in the area. So we want to solidify some of those requirements. And it's mostly going to be for the industrial, the commercial, the non-residential.
Have you pinpointed
Buildings.
someone? Have you pinpointed?
So we went through our process and went out for public notice on it. We are working with one consultant now who did respond and working on getting a scope of work for that. And
Enterprise?
That'll come back.
That'll come to
before-
council?
depending on how our levels work right now, is that a certain dollar amount would come back before you for approval, but we would let you know, of course, and keep you updated on who that is. And we're trying to get that solidified in the next couple weeks. It's also the next item on your agenda for tonight, but a little bit.
Why I
But
brought
when
it
we
up.
do get started with that consultant, there will be, there will be engagement and stakeholder engagement. You all are one of our stakeholders, of course, very important. We'll be working with you all on getting some conceptual, your ideas, your general goals, things like that to help us start framing
Okay.
things together.
Very
It's to get some, solidify our requirements, not drive people out of building here or drive up costs too high.
But in regards to the matter on the agenda, are you okay with this metal facade?
Yeah, I'm good with it. We did it at Planning Commission. I thought we need to do it. It's new and it's great because it doesn't rot like wood does and.
Well, I think probably what was the initial intention of that code was to avoid metal buildings.
Yeah, you know
like
what?
kind of just old school industrial metal
Yeah.
buildings.
Architectural materials have come a long way.
Right.
There's architectural metals, there's different metal panel types, there's things that actually bring design and do enhance, buildings
Agreed.
now. And we just didn't have that back 10, 15, 20 years ago. So that was the original scope of having.
And so the
that
threshold
area.
of 40% still gives us some purview. It's like, hey, if you're going to do a whole, we would at least like to see what it looks like, so it's not just some.
Correct.
I would be okay with that. Is everybody else all right with that? Else from us there?
No, thank you, that's
Okay,
wonderful.
Great.
2 for 3.
So, so we're now on to item F.
We are, we have one more,
one more.
one more recommendation discussion with you all in here. So, right now, general modifications, require a full public hearing process. So if a developer has gone through our 12-week process of public hearing, planning commission, and then on to city council for public hearing, if they then return for whatever reasons and when they're doing their final development plan, if they have a very small change, like maybe just to a parking setback, or maybe they just need to move a buffer over a little bit but not reduce it, it still requires this 12-week process. And so we wanted to look at, again, just streamlining that area and wanted to identify, could there be some what we want to call minor modifications that could be asked and could be handled at the planning commission level. So I made for you a chart here, and the left-hand side modification shows all of the different areas. This is about 85–90% of our areas. There's some other sections too, but these are the big ones. These are our modification areas that people can ask for a modification on. And so right now, these all require planning commission and city council approval. Now, if they're currently going through the zoning process, that's not a problem at all because we just do it all concurrently. But again, if we're at a final development plan stage, which is usually administratively approved, then you have folks having to go back through the entire process again. So their 1-week process turns into like 12 weeks. So to find that kind of middle ground, there's 4 areas we would like to recommend that possibly planning commission could be the ones and the authority to approve. The first is parking, and it's not to the amount of parking, it's just the parking setback itself. We do get quite a lot of requests for parking setbacks. A couple examples were like Die Ventures that recently came through. They had to go through the 12-week process and 2 public hearings because one of the reasons, just the parking setback. And again, whenever folks have asked for those parking setback, we've had 100% approval for them as well. The other one, about midway through, is RTU, if your rooftop unit screening. So it's not whether or not they should screen the rooftop equipment, because they always should. But right now, the code requires that the only screening method is to build a large parapet wall around the whole building. It doesn't allow you to just screen the unit itself, which sometimes can even look better architecturally than putting up this parapet. So if we have projects and developments for the certain building style that could work better, right now, again, it's a 12-week process. So thinking that could be something as like a minor modification that planning commission could be the approval authority on. We just talked about building materials. If you want to go over that 40%, that would be, if, again, we're outside of going through a zoning action too, having that be planning commission, and then buffer location. And this one's interesting. So it's not reducing your landscape buffer, but right now the code says that your landscape buffer for any development, you basically have to start from your side or rear property line. So if you have a detention basin there, or if you have a stream bank, or if you have utility easement, you can't landscape right there. You might have to shift and start it over just a little bit. You're still going to plant it, but it just can't start at the edge of your property. Right now, just to do that, we have to go through a 12-week process with them to have 2 public hearings and go through. So again, those kind of site design things, just want to see for those efficiencies and just some process streamlining, if you all would be open to maybe those are approved not by staff but by planning commission. And again, outside of a zoning process. So if they're coming through with rezoning and PDP and they happen to know it at the time, it does go through that process and for your review and approval. These are also happen to be some of the ones where we've had projects recently and some folks have asked us, hey, does this have to go through? Is there a shorter process to this, or is there something different for these kind of minor changes that people want to make? And so the red line just basically would look like this. So it just would go to Planning Commission for these specific items only, but nothing else. And it would be on their like consent agenda. And again, happy to answer any questions about that and what your thoughts are.
Ms. Rader?
Well, first of all, we have an excellent planning commission, so, and they scrutinize everything on there. They're very thorough. I think that sounds like a great idea, as someone that had to go through 2 processes for landscaping. But yeah, so I think I think it's great. And I think it just streamlines things more and encourages people. Come to Lee Summit because we're fast.
I don't see any issue with it.
So if it's going through zoning, PDP, it will go through planning commission before it comes to us anyway.
Yes, that does not change.
But, right, but you're saying if there was a parking setback issue with that, the planning commission could make that approval then before it came to us, is that what you're saying?
No, what I'm saying actually is,
'Cause
say
they
they
would do
go
that
through
anyway.
zoning and they go through preliminary development plan approval and they're at the final development plan stage, which would normally be done administratively by staff. If they need if they realize at that time with their full engineer drawings, oh, we need a 2-foot setback change for this parking, we can't approve that final development plan. We currently tell them, I'm sorry, you have to revise your preliminary development plan and go through that 12-week process all over again. So instead, we would tell them, okay, we still can't approve your final development plan. You need to revise your preliminary, but you can do that by just going to Planning Commission, 1 meeting, and you're done, and then you come back and submit your FDP. So it would become like a 4-week process or 5-week.
Yeah. Ms. Hodges?
So on the metal one, that's kind of where I'm struggling, just because we're adding it. Is there something where we could put, because I feel like if you go from 40 to like a 75, it's going to be a big difference. Like can we put something to where it's like over 40, but not to exceed a certain limit?
Sure.
I just feel like it's pretty extreme difference, and then we're gonna be like, well, that's not what we approved.
Yeah.
So I don't know. That's just the one that sticks out to me. Not that's a huge deal, but I feel like it would be a drastic difference if.
That makes sense. So maybe if it's, anything over 40, but not greater than 75% of the facade.
Right, or something, yeah, something to that extent.
Can you give me an example of where that would happen on metal? Like
So-
where, like, I could see how you might have some issues with the parking setback or maybe the screening or even the buffer location, but I'm just trying to understand how they would get to the final
Oh, okay, so I think
development plan and
first.
say like, oh, this needs to be over 40%, like.
Oh, sure. So this one generally probably would happen more on a rare occasion because we do require architectural elevations at the time of PDP and zoning. So the only way that this would kind of happen is if someone, when we were doing the calculations with them and they get the final calculations done, or if the building changed slightly and it maybe crept from, a little bit over what they originally thought they were going to be in the first place, if that makes sense. So PDP, those preliminary development plans look very complete, I know to you all, but there's actually a lot more that still gets baked in those afterwards and the details get done, and it could change something slightly. But to your point, since we do require architectural elevations during that zoning phase, they're going to, 9 times out of 10, they're going to know then if they're going to be over that 40 or not. So this, we could imagine when we're talking internally, would be more of those times where, hey, they thought they were going to be at 40 during zoning, and it turns out they're at 43 or 45%. Yeah. And if you'd like to, so a couple buildings that we've had recently, and I have pictures if you'd like to see those, but the Mid-Continent Public Library used, I think, over 80% metal. DiVentures was 100% or 98% metal. MCC Longview that recently came through was over 90% metal.
That went through DiVentures went through the full process.
That did, and that was a good example. So they had zoning approval, they had PDP approval, they came into staff for their final plan, and we're like, sorry, and they went back through.
I like Councilman Hodges' suggestion there too, like if it's gonna maybe not to exceed a certain amount. But I would be in support of this. What's everybody else think?
I like it with Councilmember Hodges' modification.
For clarity on that, 75%?
75.99999. Just kidding.
Less than 76%.
75 is great.
And we'll do 75% of the total all building elevations, not just one facade. Okay. Thank you very much. And then
Now-
if you'd like to know what the process is, so we do have, this is the kind of our roadmap of what a UDO life looks like going down the road. So starts with that initiation, the research, we come to CEDC for collaboration and feedback from you all, then Planning Commission public hearing, and then back to City Council again. So
You guys do great visuals,
thank you.
little icons, and
That,
visual guy.
that didn't start till Amy started.
I like it.
It's my side gig. So thank you.
Great, thank you.
I was just saying how that road, the curves are all wrong in that road.
From an engineering standpoint, this is a hot mess, but from
Well, I just go, oh, shiny pictures.
the
cool,
grade, the
icons.
grade looks good, yeah.
All right, so are we ready for the item F, the next one?
Yes, I am, if you are, that'd
Okay.
be great.
2024-6490, discussion on the project status regarding updates to the architecture and building design requirements of the UDO.
Yes.
Ms. Nassif.
So happy to be here again. Amy Elizabeth Nassif. So back in June, we talked about hiring the consultant, and part of that too is also, we've written architectural codes before. It's just time, and we want to get it done sooner rather than later as well. And then also really helps with the engagement piece to have a consultant assisting too. So we are very excited. We did have 2 responses back. We're working with one to try to get a scope of work and everything. What did I do wrong?
No,
Is this
you
not
did
me?
Nothing
Chief
wrong.
Snyder leaving, and he's next. Sorry. Oh, you got it? Okay.
I could be done.
Sorry. It's like he waited.
Anyway, and that's all. Thank you very much.
All right.
But yeah, just wanted to give you another just small update, and hopefully, and we're looking forward to seeing, you all and starting with stakeholders this fall or late spring. There's a quiz on what I said. Okay.
That's funny.
Anyway, just if you had any questions about the status update, we just wanted to share that with you.
Raider.
Amy Elizabeth Noel Nassif.
I overshared.
Thank you. Thank you for your patience with me. And I had a little ESP or something going on there just to jump ahead.
It
I thought it was all in there.
was a wonderful segue.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
That brings us back to what was originally item B. TMP 3087, an ordinance authorizing the execution of a memorandum of understanding by and between the City of Lee Summit, Missouri and the Missouri Telecommunicator Emergency Response Task Force, also known as MoTERT, for emergency telecommunication mutual aid and cooperation in response to natural and man-made disasters. And you are not Chief Snyder or Chief Forbes.
I am not. Major Nicole Marie Walters with the Police Department. What you have in front of you is the Memorandum of Understanding. It's basically a task force that involves comprehensive training program that provides assistance in developing a program that will lead to having trained and predetermined team of telecommunicators who can be mobilized quickly and deployed to assist during a natural disaster. Oftentimes, if we have a natural disaster, our communication centers struggle with staffing, so they would be able to mobilize quickly, give us more staffing, but they recommend that we do a memorandum of understanding. So, any other questions? Good.
Sorry to make you wait this long.
No, that's okay.
Do you need anything from us on that, or?
Yeah, so with this one, we'd be looking for a motion to recommend approval to the city council.
All right, so I moved to recommend to City Council approval of Agenda Item TMP-3087, an ordinance authorizing the execution of a memorandum of understanding by and between the City of Lee Summit, Missouri and the Missouri Telecommunicator Emergency Response Task Force for emergency telecommunication, mutual aid, and cooperation in response to natural and man-made disasters.
Second.
All right, got a motion by Councilmember Hodges, second by Councilmember Rader. Can I get a roll call vote, please?
Vice Chair Pryor,
Aye.
Councilmember Hodges.
Aye.
Councilmember Rader,
Aye.
Chair Lovell.
Aye. I think
Thank you.
that's it. Roundtable, anyone? Ms. Rader, do you have anything you'd like to say? Been awful quiet tonight.
I do. Thank you for your patience, everyone, and putting up with my questions. But, I learned a lot. If that makes any difference. Thank you. Really, I mean it, though, really. Thank you.
All joking aside, I appreciate your thoroughness and asking a lot of questions. I think everybody up here does a good job. Appreciate staff's helping us understand things better too. So, anything from your end?
Yes. Because,
Joshua Raymond Johnson?
well, I'll point out that Christopher Shannon McGuire went and printed off the resilient economy part of the comprehensive plan for all of you. So we'll have it in your hands right now.
Oh. Thank you. Well, Chair John Thomas Lovell III appreciates this. Are we done?
I think that's all.
Okay, well, we will officially adjourn this meeting at 5:40. Wow, have you ever had so much fun?